My name is Julia Matthews. And for 12 years, I let people think I was just the wife, the supportive spouse behind the man, the quiet presence at corporate dinners, the woman who smiled without speaking too much. I let them believe I was lucky to have him. Lucky to be included. Lucky to be tolerated in the circles he moved in. At first, I told myself I didn't mind. That love meant compromise. That being underestimated was just part of the package when you married into old money and older expectations. But I wasn't just being underestimated. I was being erased. One polite smile at a time. I had a degree in environmental engineering, a decade of research under my belt, and a startup idea that kept me up at night, not from stress, but from possibility. I was building something, quietly, steadily, alone. While he climbed the ladder with his mother's praise echoing in his ears, I was laying the foundation for a ladder of my own. But the world didn't see that. They saw what they wanted to see. A polished wife, a helper, a hobbyist. Until one night, that illusion cracked. And I stopped being silent. This is not a story about revenge. It's about recognition. And how, sometimes, the most powerful voice is the one that chooses when and how to finally be heard. I can count the number of times Elizabeth Matthews, my mother-in-law, asked me a genuine question on one hand, and I wouldn't need all 5 fingers. She was the kind of woman who wielded compliments like daggers and made condescension sound like concern. To her, I was always Julia. Richard's wife? Never Julia. The engineer? Julia. The founder? Julia. The woman with vision. The first time she dismissed my company, we were at a Christmas dinner. I had just gotten off a Zoom call with a European venture group. I was excited, glowing even. When I sat down at the table, she barely looked up from her wine glass when she said, "That's nice. Keeping busy is important." Dear. Richard chuckled and reached for the roast. No one else said a word. At first, it stung. Then it started to numb. Over time, I learned to smile through it, to laugh at the jokes, to play the part. I hosted the dinner parties. I rearranged my schedule for his promotions. I wore the dresses she approved of. I gave up my last name. I gave up a lot more than that. There was this one night Richard's firm had just landed a major client. We were at a gala, and he was surrounded by congratulatory handshakes. Elizabeth held court like a queen, beaming as she told everyone how hard he'd worked. I stood nearby, holding my champagne and biting my tongue. She introduced me to a partner's wife as Julia, who runs a little side project with recycled tech or something like that. I'd just signed a patent deal that morning, but no one asked. The irony was, I wasn't angry. Not yet. I believed that eventually, my work would speak loud enough. That one day, they would notice. But the truth is, people don't hear what they don't want to listen to, especially when they've already decided who you are. Richard wasn't much different. At home, he was kinder than his mother, but not by much. Supportive in a passive kind of way. He never said I couldn't build my company. He just never asked how it was going. When I worked late, he assumed it was because I was bored. When I got excited about prototypes, he changed the subject. One afternoon, I showed him the early data from our carbon filtration tests. I was practically bouncing. His eyes glazed over halfway through and he said, "That's great. Babe, you should totally pitch that to Shark Tank or something." He wasn't being cruel. Just careless. Like always. And so I did what women like me are taught to do. I tucked my ambition behind folded laundry and dinner reservations. I told myself it was just a phase. Just a season. Just temporary. But seasons don't last 12 years. And silence doesn't protect you. It buries you. Every quiet nod. Every overlooked idea. Every patronizing pat on the back. They were bricks in the wall. I let them build around me. But what they never realized was I was also laying bricks. Mine didn't build a wall. They built an empire. It just wasn't time to show it yet. The crystal flute felt heavier than usual in my hand. Around me, laughter swirled through the penthouse like perfume expensive. Rehearsed. Suffocating. I stood near the edge of the room. Just close enough to be seen. Just far enough to be ignored. Elizabeth tapped her glass with the precision of someone who expected silence to follow. It did. She smiled that regal smile of hers, all gloss and angles, and raised her glass high. To Richard, she announced. My brilliant son. Senior partner at last. You've made the Matthews name proud. Everyone clapped. I didn't. Not because I wasn't proud, but because I was too busy remembering how many nights I stayed up editing his proposals, formatting his pitch decks while he snored on the couch. No one saw that. No one ever does. Then came the moment that made my stomach twist. As every rising star deserves a sanctuary, Elizabeth said, I've purchased something special for you. Her assistant stepped forward, handing Richard an envelope with a silk ribbon tied perfectly at the center. The room leaned in. Richard opened it slowly, holding up a glossy photo. A penthouse suite. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Downtown skyline. It's in the Arlo building, she added. Walking distance from the office. Perfect for those late nights. She winked, and a ripple of polite chuckles spread across the room. He looked stunned. Mother, this is incredible. My fingers tightened around my glass. I felt the blood rush in my ears. But my face didn't move. From across the room, I caught my sister Lily's eyes. She knew. I could see it. She walked over and gripped my arm gently. Tell me you're not going to let this happen, she whispered. I didn't answer. I just gave her the smallest nod. Because I wasn't going to let it happen. I was going to end it. My phone buzzed inside my clutch. I slipped away from the crowd, headed toward the powder room, my heels echoing down the hallway like a countdown. When I pulled out my phone, the message from my attorney was waiting. Wire transfer confirmed. Title clears tomorrow at 9 a.m. Congrats. Mrs. Matthews. I exhaled slowly, adjusted my lipstick in the mirror, smoothed down the emerald dress Elizabeth once called a little loud. Then I walked back into that party like I'd never left. Richard was still marveling over the penthouse photos. His assistant Chloe, standing uncomfortably close. Her laugh just a little too sweet. Elizabeth was already fielding questions about the property. I took my place beside them. Champagne in hand. It's beautiful, I said. The Arlo building. Right, penthouse unit, Elizabeth blinked. You've seen it, I smiled. I'm quite familiar with the property. She tilted her head. Oh, in fact, I added, I had my eye on that unit myself. Richard looked up then. Wait, what? Elizabeth laughed. Sharp and crystalline. Darling, your little company doesn't really need a downtown office. Does it? Oh, I'm not offended, I replied smoothly. Though I should mention, the previous owner, Mr. Garrett, was very particular about who he sold to. Did you meet him? She waved a hand. My lawyer handled everything. The deal's done. My phone buzzed again. Seller confirmed your offer takes precedence. Matthews escrow will be refunded Monday. I raised my glass slightly. Here's to new beginnings. No one responded. They were too busy pretending nothing had happened. But I saw the shift in Elizabeth's eyes. Just for a second. The moment her world cracked, I didn't stay long after that. I cited a headache, kissed Richard on the cheek, and left while he laughed with Chloe over room layouts. They had no idea what was coming. The condo wasn't revenge. It was a warning. And it was only the beginning. While they were busy planning Richard's next promotion, I was planning something else. I started the company in our garage, between car seats and broken garden tools. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even registered under my name at first. Just a string of numbers on a Delaware LLC. A shell. A shadow. A shield. The work was real. Though, our first prototype was ugly duct tape and borrowed wires, but it worked. A filter that could reduce carbon emissions from small engines by 42%. We called it the seed. And it grew. I didn't hire flashy marketers. I hired engineers. Former students. Freelancers. A woman I met at a recycling center who knew more about chemical flow than half the professors I'd studied under. We didn't chase investors. We chased solutions. While Richard bragged about client dinners, I stayed up at night learning how to write grants. I built pitch decks while folding laundry. I coded between school pickups. I missed galas, but never missed a lab review. When the first patent came through, I framed it quietly and hung it in my office. My real office. The one in the back of the house. Where no one visited except for Lily and maybe the dog. We got funding 2 years later. Not from Silicon Valley. From the Department of Energy. They were interested in our adaptive system for coal retrofitting. Our tech could make aging plants run cleaner with minimal overhaul. It was cheaper. Scalable. Urgent. Richard never asked what I was working on. Elizabeth once referred to it as Julia's little eco thing. I let them laugh. I let them believe. Because hiding in plain sight is an art. And when the time came, I didn't want applause. I wanted leverage. By the time I closed the contract with GreenRock, we had 3 full-time staff and 5 patents pending. We were small, but we were dangerous. The market didn't know about us yet. Neither did Richard. But the government did. And a few oil giants were starting to pay attention. We weren't making noise. We were making moves. And all they saw was a wife who worked from home in yoga pants. A woman who liked clean air and compost bins. Let them think that. That's what gave me time. It was a Tuesday when I found the recording. I wasn't looking for it. Lily had stopped by with takeout. And while we were setting the table, she noticed the baby monitor blinking red in my home office. I hadn't used it in years. It must have been left on by accident. We clicked it out of curiosity. What played was not curiosity. It was a conversation barely 2 hours old. Elizabeth's voice came through first. She's getting in the way. The girl has energy, drive, youth. And she makes Richard feel needed. That's a good thing. We just need to make sure Julia's too distracted to notice. Then another voice. Softer. Younger. Chloe? I can handle that. I already have access to his work laptop. If he logs in from home, her company's data passes right through it. I felt my stomach turn. Lily froze beside me. Chopsticks suspended midair. She's not even subtle about it. I whispered. We played the next 10 minutes in silence. They talked about how to keep me occupied. How to access my company email through shared Wi-Fi. How to slowly leak documents to a potential buyer in Canada. Chloe mentioned offering Richard comfort during his marital confusion. Comfort. That was the word she used. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I stood up. Walked to the kitchen. Poured a glass of water. And sat back down. You okay? Lily asked. I nodded once. Then twice. Then I smiled. That was the moment something inside me clicked. They thought they were building something clever. A plot. A plan. A backroom betrayal dressed in lip gloss and tailored suits. They forgot I was an engineer. I don't guess. I calculate. I don't react. I prepare. And they just handed me blueprints for their own destruction. The next morning, I met with my attorney. Claire. She was a former SEC prosecutor turned corporate compliance hawk. She didn't do hand-holding. She did numbers. Paperwork. Leverage. I gave her the audio file. The IP traces from Chloe's login attempts. And a detailed timeline of all the shell companies I had quietly formed over the past 2 years. We reviewed everything twice. Then she looked at me. You've been preparing this for a long time. No. I said. I've just been surviving for a long time. Now I'm building. By Friday. We confirmed it. Elizabeth had illegally liquidated restricted company shares that required board approval to move. She used those funds to gift the penthouse to Richard, hoping to sideline me permanently, but the account she sold from wasn't even properly authorized. And the stock, thanks to multiple acquisitions under different LLCs, was now largely under my control. 15%. That was the number Claire said out loud while sipping her tea. Enough to demand a seat at the table. Enough to call a board vote. They think they own everything. She added. The name. The reputation. Even you. Let them keep thinking that. I replied. At least for now. That night. Richard came home late. I told him dinner was in the fridge. He didn't ask how my day was. I didn't offer. I already had a new calendar event scheduled. Monday. 9:00 a.m. Matthews Industries. Emergency board meeting. Requested by majority shareholder. The conference room smelled like coffee and fear. I arrived 5 minutes early. My files in hand. My hair tied back. I wore a dark navy suit, structured. Sharp. A little tighter in the sleeves than I remembered. I hadn't worn it since my last investor pitch. 3 years ago. Elizabeth was already seated at the head of the table. Richard sat beside her. Brows furrowed. Chloe wasn't there. HR had taken care of that part. 12 board members filled the long glass room. They murmured among themselves, glancing up when I entered. A few looked surprised. 1 or 2 looked curious. No one looked dismissive. That was new. Mrs. Matthews, the chairman said, clearing his throat. We weren't expecting. I'm not here as a guest. I said calmly. I'm here as a shareholder. In fact, the largest individual shareholder. Gasps. Silence. Then Elizabeth's voice. Ice over gravel. You can't be serious. I placed my folder on the table, flipping it open. Over the past 2 years, I've acquired equity through 5 legally incorporated holding companies. All funded independently. All compliant. As of last week, those holdings exceed 15%. You still don't have board control, Richard said, forcing a chuckle. This isn't some tech startup. Julia. No. I agreed. It's a public-facing legacy firm under federal regulatory scrutiny, which is why I've brought documentation, internal emails, transfer log, and financial audits showing misuse of restricted stock, and evidence of corporate espionage conducted through a romantic entanglement your mother helped facilitate. Elizabeth stood up, her chair scraping loudly behind her. That's slander. That's evidence. I corrected. The time-stamped kind. Verified by cybersecurity experts and backed by bank records. The room went quiet again. One of the senior members, a man named Douglas, spoke next. Is this about revenge? No. This is about correction. Because while you were all busy watching Richard rise, I was watching how far this company could fall. You've ignored compliance issues, covered insider trades, promoted based on bloodline instead of merit, and now it's affecting the bottom line. I paused, letting the words settle. But it doesn't have to. I slid the final sheet across the table. I'm proposing a strategic partnership between Matthews Industries and my firm, Ecovanta. We can retrofit your aging plants with green filtration within a year. It's cost-effective, federally supported, and public relations gold. The chairman looked between the paper and me. This would make us compliant with the new EPA standards. Within the quarter, I confirmed. Or you can keep pretending everything's fine until someone less friendly than me comes knocking. Elizabeth leaned forward, voice trembling. You wouldn't dare. This is our family's legacy. Actually, I replied, picking up the original partnership agreement from the folder. It belongs to its shareholders. And starting today, the shareholders know everything. Richard stood up abruptly. Julia, think about what you're doing. I already have. He looked at the others. Searching for backup. Finding none. This will destroy our name. He said softly. No. I said. It will rebuild your company. I'm not here to tear it down. I'm here to take it forward. The vote wasn't close. 10 in favor. 2 abstained. None opposed. Elizabeth was removed from her position. The partnership was approved. I was offered a seat on the board and accepted without smiling. Because this wasn't a victory lap. This was just the start. Taking control was never about noise for me. It was about precision, quiet moves, délibérate décision, and letting results do the talking. After the board meeting, my days became a steady rhythm of calls, meetings, and presentations. Unlike before, I wasn't the silent observer in the background anymore. I was the one leading. The press caught wind quickly. Headlines called me the green tech disruptor and corporate comeback queen. But I never read them. They were distractions. Marley's arrest was the last piece of the puzzle. Her attempts to steal our technology and sell company secrets landed her in cuffs. Richard faced internal investigations. Neither surprised me. I refused to gloat. I didn't want to be the woman who tore down others to feel powerful. I wanted to be the woman who built power. Others wanted to follow. Every project we launched had one goal: sustainability paired with integrity. Our latest initiative focused on community housing with renewable energy. Real change. Real impact. I was often asked if I felt vindicated. I don't think that's the right word. What I felt was relief. Relief that I could finally be seen, heard, respected. Power isn't loud. It's precise. It's the kind of strength that lets you walk away from chaos knowing you've already won. Elizabeth's illness progressed faster than any of us expected. The same woman who once ruled boardrooms and dinner parties was now frail, resting in a sterile hospital bed. One afternoon, I received a letter from her. Her handwriting, usually sharp and neat, was shaky. The words inside weren't apologies. They were admissions. She wrote that she understood now what it meant to feel powerless, how the control she clung to had only isolated her. That, in trying to shape everyone's life, she lost her own. Reading it, I didn't feel triumph. I felt peace. This was the closure I needed. Not vengeance. When I visited her, I sat quietly by the bedside. We didn't exchange many words. None were necessary. She looked up at me once and whispered, "You changed." Not the way I expected. I smiled softly and said, "I changed because I had to. Because I decided who I wanted to be." Leaving the hospital, I didn't look back. The past was a closed chapter. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is walk away with grace. I never lived in that penthouse. Not really. To most, it was just a trophy proof that I'd outmaneuvered Elizabeth and reclaimed my place. But to me, it was a symbol of something far greater. So I donated the keys. The penthouse became a sanctuary for women escaping abuse. A place where new lives could begin without fear or judgment. The shelter director's gratitude was humbling. At the same time, Ecovanta expanded its mission. We launched affordable, sustainable housing projects powered by our carbon capture technology. The same technology Elizabeth once dismissed as a hobby was now changing communities. Sometimes I'm asked if I regret the battle, if I wish things had been different. But battles aren't won without scars. And growth isn't possible without fire. I don't want revenge. I want rebirth. Every obstacle was a stepping stone. Every slight, a leçon. My power isn't in tearing others down. It's in building something that lasts. Something that matters. And that is the legacy I choose. They always thought this was a game of chess. Moving pawns. Sacrificing pieces. Guarding the king. But I wasn't a pawn. I wasn't a piece on their board. I was the hand that flipped it. When Richard emailed me from prison, I didn't reply. Some chapters don't need a response. They need closure. My focus is on the future, on the projects waiting to launch, on the lives waiting to change, on the clean air and safe homes we'll build. I am no longer defined by their underestimation. I am defined by the strength I found when I stopped being silent. And that strength will carry me farther than any game ever could.